All right, everybody, welcome back into another Auburn Live basketball show. Appreciate everybody joining us. I am Justin Hokanson. With me, as always, Mr. Alan Head. What's up, man?
What's up, buddy? How you doing, Hope?
Good, good. Uh, had a week off from football, but yeah, man, basketball postseason, spring practice for football about to crank up. So busy couple weeks at Auburn Live. It's gonna be cranking.
No doubt about it, man. And obviously had a great week of basketball this past week. I know we'll talk about that in passing and then get into talking about what are we looking like going to the SEC tournament. I think that's what everybody wants to hear about. It's the focus. It's March Madness, which we're at the cusp of it, or I guess at the precipice of it, moving into the big tournament. So what to expect? I think that's what's on everybody's mind.
Yeah, let's get into it real quick before we do. Shout out our sponsors, Session Cocktail, downtown Auburn, right there on Magnolia Avenue. Go check them out. They just, I think, mixed up the menu as spring gets closer. I don't know, it's not officially spring, but I mean, pollen's in the air, so I feel like we're there. But go check them out right there on Magnolia. Go check out Session. I think they're starting to do some deals on happy hours and stuff in the week. So I think you can get really good deals on cocktails during that happy hour time. They started doing trivia on Tuesday nights. It's different every Tuesday night, but go in there and I think you can win prizes and stuff like that. So Tuesday night's fun to do some trivia. So go check it out. Appreciate them being a part of a big sponsor of the show, Session Cocktails, downtown Auburn, as well as Game Time. Go check out gametime.co if you don't have the app. We talk about them a lot. They're big partners with On3 as well as Auburn Live. So go check out gametime.co, last-minute tickets for sporting events and concerts and comedy shows and all that good stuff. I don't know what tickets might be running in Nashville, but it'll be obviously a great app to go check out tickets in Nashville, especially as teams get eliminated, ticket prices change. Some tickets might come available, all that good stuff. So make sure you've got that app if you're going to Nashville and you're trying to get tickets for Auburn's game on Friday, which should be around 2:30 Central. So gametime.co, go check them out. Promo code War Eagle, 20% off your first purchase. All right, let's jump into this thing. Some news off the top. Janai Broome, first team All SEC, first team All Defensive Team in the league. Jalen Williams, All SEC, second team. Aiden Holloway, first team All Freshman. I think it's the 15th player Auburn's ever put on the All Freshman team. I think it's the fourth player under Bruce that's made first team All SEC, along with Walker, Jabari, and Samir. And then, Jalen gets second team honors. Jalen was probably, he was making a case for first team for a while. And then, his number, I don't say his numbers trailed off, but like he was on a tear there in the middle. Still put up great numbers. You probably could have made the case for him to be a first team, but there's some good players there too. But either way, second team All SEC honors for Jalen Williams as Auburn goes into the postseason 24-7. 13-5 in league play, second most league wins under Bruce Pearl. The Jabari Walker team had 15. The Mustafa team, the 2018 team had 13 as well. The first SEC championship had 13. And then it was this team with 13. The Final Four team I think had 11. I think they went 11-7. Last year's team went 10-8. And the Samir team I think went 12-6.
Yes.
I think 12-6. So, and like Bruce said, he was like, look, top four in this league this year is an accomplishment. And I would agree. I don't know let's just say the last 7-8 years, because I do think it sort of coincides. That first championship with Bruce sort of coincides with Rick Barnes came into the year. Well, go back further. Pearl got here in 14. Rick Barnes got here in 15. Musselman got here in 19. So right there, 17, 18, 19 was a dramatic shift in the conference. Pearl and Barnes had been here. Then here comes Musselman. And then here comes, Nate Oates. I can't remember exactly what year he was hired, but sort of this last 7 years has been a different league. It's been a much more competitive league in that stretch, man. This year was as good as I've seen it. I mean, it just was, it was really tough, really, really, really good. And Bruce made a good point. The, last year's co-coach of the year, I guess, was Missouri's Dennis Gates. They went over this year.
Right.
I mean, and that's not – the guy didn't forget how to coach. I think the league just got really, really good. So it's kind of where we're at. Auburn's the number 4 seed. We'll play on Friday afternoon, 2:30 against either Arkansas, Vanderbilt, or South Carolina. Feels like probably Arkansas or South Carolina, unless Vandy pulls an upset against Arkansas. Feels like it'll be a winner of Arkansas, South Carolina, which Arkansas is a different team now than when Auburn played them game 1 of the SEC schedule. So that'll be interesting. And then if they were to win, probably get Tennessee on Saturday. Tennessee's got to win some games too. That's kind of where we're at as Auburn goes into this postseason. I'll sort of let you kind of give your thoughts. I posted on X on Sunday, I guess, that I think it's the most balanced team Bruce has brought into the postseason at Auburn. And then I went and looked up stats and kind of backed it up and took his best 5 teams and took like the top 10 categories in terms of offensive and defensive efficiency and block percentage and assist rate and what I thought were 10 pretty main categories of the 18 team, the 19 team, the 20 team, the 22 and 24, the 5 best teams I think he's had. This team this year had the best, was a top in 5 of the 10 categories. They were first, and then like a couple they were second. So I think it's the most balanced team he's taken to the postseason. Now, does that mean that they're going to make the deepest run? No, because we know matchups matter and all that good stuff. But I think going in, it's probably the most well-prepared team or best equipped team to make a run. Whether they do it or not, we'll see. How do you feel going into postseason, sort of where they're at now? And like, does the SEC tournament matter to you? Just kind of what are your thoughts going to Nashville, and where do you think the team sort of is, with the NCAA tournament like a week and a half away?
Sure. Well, let's start by looking at what you've kind of done moving into this month of March. And obviously in the first couple of weeks of March, or the first week of March, you've won 3 out of your last 4. Now, I'd argue that other than Tennessee, the competition hasn't been spectacular, but Mississippi State is a potential tournament team. You've also played a rival in Georgia, and then you went on the road in Columbia, where it's not exactly an easy place to play, and they played everybody pretty difficult. I mean, pretty tough, right? I mean, they haven't gotten really blown out, with the exception of what Auburn was able to accomplish when they went up there. You're shooting the ball at probably the best clip you shot it at since 2019, in my honest opinion, maybe 2020, and that Samir team. But right now, you're seeing a team kind of start to really hit its stride again. You go through lulls in a season, and you always want to make sure that you're playing your best basketball as you move into March. And I think this team is doing that, Justin. We're going to get a better gauge of that in the SEC tournament, and that's why it is important to me. You mentioned, is the SEC tournament important to me? It is, and because I want to see Auburn be in rhythm, shooting on a neutral site. I think we've been plagued by that in the last 2 years where we've been in the SEC tournament. We haven't looked exactly crisp in that opening game, and we've suffered defeats because of it. We've been one and done in the SEC tournament. Can we get, if things go chalk, you get a tough team in South Carolina who knows who they are. They play within themselves. They're obviously going to be motivated because the last time those 2 teams faced up, Auburn won by 40-plus points. I guarantee you that's still on their mind to a degree, and they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. So can Auburn be focused? Can they do what they need to do? They match up very well against South Carolina, in my opinion. I think that's a game Auburn can win. But are you shooting the ball the way you need to? Are you being unselfish with it? The point guard play, and that's the other big thing. This time of the year, point guard play is pivotal. When they get into a tournament like this, it's going to be a little bit different of an atmosphere. How do Aiden and Trey adjust? Aiden's in his first year of playing college basketball. Trey's just in his second year. He didn't play a ton in year 1. So are they ready to take on that challenge? That's also what I want to see in the SEC tournament. And I think we're a 4 seed right now, nationally speaking. I think we're going to be a top 16 national seed, but you don't know that. And so to feel better about that situation, I think you can solidify yourself there to get, if you get 1 or 2 wins in the SEC tournament, that definitely helps your cause. So being that top 16 national seed, being a 4 seed matters to me. I think it matters to this team. It matters to Bruce. And making sure also that you're kind of in rhythm, that you're in sync, that you're continuing on with that move up the ladder as it pertains to your performance on the court, and not necessarily moving backwards, moving into the tournament. And you're right, the draw does matter. Okay, the draw always matters in March, who you get matched up against, what arena you're playing in. All those things matter. But control the things you can control, right? And the things that they can control, their effort, their energy, the way they're sharing the basketball, the style of basketball that they're playing. Those are things that they can control. And you want to see them in a neutral site in Nashville where it's not necessarily going to be the most friendly. I mean, I think they're going to have Auburn fans, don't get me wrong. But when you play against Tennessee in Nashville, you know the arena is going to be loaded with UT fans. If you play Kentucky in Nashville, you know Kentucky's going to have that arena absolutely just taken over at some point. So you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have some adverse conditions you're going to have to play in. This is going to be a great testing ground or stomping ground for them to kind of figure some things out as they move into the NCAA tournament. And I'm excited. I'm excited to watch this team, and I'm with you. They are balanced. Denver Jones's evolution as we're moving towards this back half of the season is pivotal for this team, not only because of the way he's shooting it, but because he gives you an additional ball handler and point guard should you get in trouble with one of your other two. And so they get some kind of severe foul trouble or you get an injury. You've got a guy you can kind of lean on that's done that somewhat. So his evolution, Chad Baker-Mazara continuing to play well. Jalen, you know what you get with Janai. He brings it night in and night out, and he's a post presence you can count on. So I do. I like this team. I think it's the second weekend team in the in the NCAA tournament. But how do you feel, Hope? What is your feeling on this team? What's the ceiling to it? What do you want to see from the SEC tournament?
Yeah, I feel like they're due for a couple of NCAA tournament wins just because of how the last couple of years have gone. Now that's just sort of a gut feeling, more so until we see the matchups and stuff. It's more of a gut feeling. Like I just feel like they're due a little bit, and I think this team has been consistent all year long. I mean, game one, they had Baylor beat. They really blew that game. They were up with 3-4 minutes to go. They're winning that game by like 5. Aiden kind of had some rush shots, and they just lost track of at the end of that game. But I mean, really, from game one, they've been pretty good. They have a one letdown game, Florida.
Yeah.
That's it. The only other double digit was Kentucky. That was 11. That was a really competitive game, but Auburn didn't shoot that well. That was different than the Florida game. Florida game was they just didn't show up. Florida played exceptional, and they got blown out. That's it. So I like the consistency of what they've done all year. They play good defense. They're balanced in how they win games. Like they could shoot well from 3. Their assist rate is high. They have great interior play. They could fast break you. There's just a lot of different ways that they can attack offensively and defensively to get the job done. There's just different things they do. It's never one thing. There are a few things they need, but they can overcome some of that. So I think they're pretty well prepared. I did not think they played well against Georgia, by the way. I thought offensively, okay, fine. They played fine. Denver was a big help. I thought defensively they were far from their best, especially the second half. Georgia was more physical. Bruce said it, and you could see it on the court, especially in the paint. Auburn's been the number one defense in terms of 2-point defense. Auburn's number one in the country all season at like 40-something% 2-point defense. Well, Georgia shot like 60% inside the arc. So that was uncharacteristic. So they need to play better than that. So, I mean, they won, but like defensively, they need to step up. And I thought from a physical nature, they gotta take a bunch of notches up. In terms of going into Nashville, I don't know. I do think it's important probably to at least get a win. I mean, it's a small sample size, but you could look at it and say the 17 team went there, lost their first game to Alabama, went and didn't do anything in the, barely beat College of Charleston and got run by Clemson. The Jabari team didn't play well into the season. Like if you go look, they were not playing great. A&M beats them first game in Tampa, and then they go and they beat Jacksonville State and then lose to Miami, got run by Miami.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a correlation there. Last year's team, one and done in Nashville. Now they did beat Iowa. That was a little different. They were lower seeded, so Iowa's pretty good. And they took Houston to, for a half they played well, but got beat again. The one Bruce Pearl Auburn team that did well in Nashville turned around and did well in the NCAA tournament. But even that, man, they barely got by New Mexico State. Like so it just matchups matter, and getting out of that first game matters. I do think that Friday game could be big to solidify a 4 seed. I wrote about it, man. The difference between playing a 13 seed in the NCAA tournament and a 12 seed, it might sound like it's not a big difference. It's like a 15% chance of winning difference historically. historically, the 4 seeds at verse 13 win 15% of the time more in the first round. And then they have another 15% chance better of making the Sweet 16 than a 5 seed. So historically, it matters. And so I think they're right on the line. Everything I've seen, they're right on the line of being the last 4 seed, first 5 seed. I think they're right in there. So a win on Friday against, let's say, South Carolina, who's sitting there at 15th in the country, I think would solidify that. If Auburn's sitting there playing on Saturday's semifinal of the SEC tournament, and you've got all the computer metrics there, and they're sitting there on Saturday playing primetime basketball, it's going to be hard for the committee to go 5 seed.
Agreed.
That wouldn't really line up to me. So I don't know. I like where they're at. I mean, you're right. They're shooting the ball well. In SEC play, I looked it up. In SEC play, you got 4 guys shot 40% or better. Janai Jalen, Chad Baker, and Denver all shot 40% or better in the SEC play. That hasn't happened in this run of Bruce Pearl teams going back to 17. They had a year where they had 3 guys shoot that good, a year or 2. They never had a year where 4 guys have shot 40% or better in league play. And that's maybe your most pure shooter. Aiden went through that horrible stretch and never really got going. And he might be your best pure shooter that could catch fire at any point. So I like where they're at. It's just about matchups. I do think that Carolina game Friday if it's Carolina, I'd rather it be Carolina than Arkansas. Arkansas is just one of those teams they've got, they have the bodies, they've got the bodies. So if they decide to put it together, they're dangerous. I think Auburn matches up maybe better against Carolina. I don't know. They could be dangerous, but if it's Carolina, that'll be very different than the first game. It'll go very differently, I think. But I don't know. I mean, create your own energy on the road. These neutral sites, you got to create your own energy. This team has an ability to do that. Can they sustain it? You mentioned the guard play. I have a sneaky feeling that Trey, might step up. He's been there. He played the tournament last year. I think that matters. I hope Aiden comes out and is really confident, but I could see Trey rising to the occasion first round of the NCAA tournament, maybe being a little more comfortable with Aiden. But that's where it comes down to for me. What do you think about the guards? I think Auburn's well equipped to make a run, but the guards have to continue to rise to the occasion. And that means assist, contribute some points. Like we said, they don't have to go score 20, but those 2 guys have got to continue to rise to the occasion or Auburn won't go very far.
Agreed. I mean, can you get 10 points a game from the point guard position, have a, 4, 5, 6 assists and no turnovers, you know what I mean? Or one turnover, something of that nature. Can you do that where you're, you're getting the ball, you're starting the offense, you're getting all the play calls in that Bruce is trying to, as far as the sets are concerned, to make sure that matchups are being taken advantage of. And that's the thing. That's what you don't know with young guards. I'm with you on Trey. He's been exposed to it before. Playing in Birmingham last year, I think, was a really good step, for him as far as how he played. I thought he played really well against Iowa and shot the ball well against Houston. We just kind of ran out of gas in that second half. Houston showed you what kind of team they were. So it's not a great matchup for Auburn, but I'm with you. I can see Trey in that opening round while Aiden's still finding his footing, being like, okay, I've been here before. I know how this works. I know what to expect. And also, I'm with you on the importance of a 4 seed versus a 5 because of that 12-13 matchup. I mean, you're right. We were a 5 and New Mexico State was a 12 that year. They took us down to the wire, and it took 2 missed free throws, at the very end for Auburn to win that game. That's what it came down to. So you get some really, really difficult, interesting matchups in that 5-12, and I would really like to avoid that one if at all possible, just because of, as you said, historical precedents as far as upsets go. I really do like where Denver is and where Chad is right now. Those to me are the things that give me confidence, because I felt pretty good about knowing what we had in Jalen and definitely knowing what we had in Janai. But what were you going to get out of your wing in your 2-guard spot? And you're starting to see that maturation now. Chris Moore has, he's been reinserted into the lineup. I think he's played pretty well in these last 2 games. He's given you some energy. I think he had 4 points against Missouri. I'm not sure what he gave you against Georgia. I know he hit a big 3, but beyond that, I'm not sure exactly what he had offensively speaking. But he's played good defense. He's given you some energy. I think you're still probably going to shorten the minutes somewhat for him because
Mhm.
Chad has just started to assert himself more within the structure of the overall system, and he's just evolved as a player. But that is what gives me confidence is the depth, because if you can get to the next game, and I think Bruce talked about this and you've talked about this, Justin, but that is where Auburn's strong suit comes into play. We're talking about everybody that you have that's a contributor in the starting group, but that second group, Chaney Johnson has really performed well as of late.
Yep.
KD still gives you as much energy as anybody off the bench. He's an absolute spark plug. Trey, Dylan Cardwell, man. I mean,
Yep.
Dylan Cardwell, I'm going to say this. I hope he comes back. If Janai's turning pro, I honestly hope Dylan Cardwell comes back and continues the progression he's on right now because I've been impressed with the young man. I think he means a lot to this team. I think his presence as a veteran would mean a lot to Bruce to have him next year as well. I don't want to put words in Bruce's mouth, but that's just my 2 cents on it. But watching him and his development over the course of this past 4 years, from where he was as a freshman to where he is right now as a player, he just gives you such a solid option to come in at the 5 and relieve Janai should he be having some kind of defensive issues or he's got foul trouble or what have you. You're not bringing in, and this is going to sound derogatory, but you're not bringing in Stretch, right? You're bringing in a guy that's a competent SEC, high Power 5 level basketball player, right? Like you are bringing in somebody that's capable of giving you 10 points and, 5-6 boards a night. That's what you're bringing off the bench, and that's what you got against Georgia. So that depth up and down the roster, that's what gives me confidence about us making a run because if you can get past that 12 seed, if you can get the 4 seed and you can get past the 13, well, that gives you fresh legs because of the way you're going to use your bench moving into that 4-5 matchup. And I think that is a true advantage for Auburn. And I think it'll be an advantage in the SEC tournament where you're playing every day specifically. So if you get into that game against Tennessee, you have the likelihood of being a little fresher than they're going to be because they have a more condensed rotation. I think that's especially true against a team like Kentucky. I think they're only playing 8 guys right now. I think that's what they're rolling with. So you're talking about 2 extra bodies that are getting rotational snaps that not the same situation for other teams involved in the tournament. And when you play 3 games in 3 days, it is absolutely a war of attrition. I mean, you're just trying to have enough energy to get it across the finish line when you're playing that last game.
Yeah, they just got to keep the 3-point shooting going. They've done really well in that space last 4 or 5 games, and so neutral site, can they keep that flowing? That's a big one. Denver's a big part of that. I also think it'd be interesting. You've got Denver, Chad Baker, Chaney, and Aiden are going to have no idea what this NCAA tournament is all about. Now I say that Chad Baker did play in the NCAA tournament, I guess 3 years ago or what, or 2 years, whatever for San Diego State there.
Yeah.
But it's been a couple years since he's been in it. But he's a guy who'll probably rise to the occasion. But there are a few guys there that have never been in the NCAA tournament, and man, it's hit the ground running. There's no feeling it out. There's no, whatever. So they got to create their own energy from the get go. But that 3-point shooting staying hot is going to be a big deal. And then defensively, kind of getting back to locking in and playing at a high level. 78 against Georgia. You go 74 to Missouri. And so Mississippi State, they played well. Mississippi State played better in the second half.
Yep.
That'll be something else to watch. Auburn's been one of the best teams in the country in the first half. Second half, they're pretty average in terms of margin. They've really gotten out in front of teams in the first half of games. Most of the time, second halves, more so, second halves have been even. At Ole Miss was a different story, right? There's a few where they didn't, but a lot of times they're creating those margins in the first half. So neutral site, it's different. It's hard to create all that energy from the jump and get some kind of big lead. You got to play more a sustained level of basketball throughout. But yeah, Nashville's going to be interesting to see what happens if they face South Carolina again. That could be, sort of a muck it up kind of game. What's in the other question mark, man, if you're thinking about going to the postseason, I was thinking about this the other day, is, Auburn's got 24 wins this year. Every one's by double digits. It's unbelievable, honestly.
Yep.
It ties the 98-99 team for regular season. Now the 98-99 team turned around and won their. I remember, man, I was that team. I was younger, but I remember watching that team in the tournament. They played, I think, Alabama in the first round and crushed them.
Yep.
And then they lost to Kentucky, and then they went into the tournament, played Winthrop, crushed them. So they ended up with 26 double-digit wins, but 24 in the regular season. This team's got 24 in the regular season as well. Every single one of the wins. But on the flip side of that, every close game has been a loss because all the, they've of the 7 losses, 5 are single digits. Florida wasn't close. Kentucky was like within reach. Like even when Auburn was playing poorly, they got it to 10 with about 3.5 minutes. Like it was kind of in reach. But even if you didn't want to count that one, 5 of the 7 were single digits. That like Alabama, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Baylor, App State, those could have gone either way. I mean, down the last 3-4 minutes, a few different plays, and Auburn's on the winning side of those. So that's probably, maybe one of the biggest question marks I have is how will they react in a close game? Because when they've been close, they've lost. They just have.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know how to win close games. A lot of those were on the road. Alabama on the road, Mississippi State on the road, Tennessee on the road, Baylor neutral, App State on the road. So that's hard to win on the road. But the fact remains, in so many of these games they've lost, they've been close games and they've lost and not won. And so I think it's a fair question to say, how will they respond in Nashville if it's a 1-point game with 4 minutes left in the NCAA tournament? If it's a 2-point game, 1-point game with 3-4 minutes left, are they going to make the smart plays, the winning plays, no turnovers, take good shots? Because that's the area, man. If under Bruce Pearl, if Auburn teams have room and freedom and they feel a little bit loose, watch out.
Yep.
When things get tight is where at times you got to go, okay, it's not green light now, it's smart shot. It's run the offense. It's you got to they sort of have to shift their mindset of what they naturally want to do under Bruce in those last 3 or 4 minutes. And I think sometimes that causes an issue because you think back to some Wendell days, it can't just be green light in the last 4 minutes. It can't be that. So that's probably one of the things I'm most interested to see. And man, it would probably do them wonders to win a close game on Friday against Arkansas or South Carolina. It wouldn't be a bad thing to have a real tight game and to pull it out because they haven't been in that situation of, all right, guys, every possession now it's smart. It's make the play here. It's block, no offensive rebounds. I mean, go back to Tuscaloosa. They gave up 2 or 3 offensive rebounds in the last 2 minutes of that game. That cannot happen. That's effort and just focus when it matters most. And that's probably one of the things that I'm not completely sure. Are they capable? Yes. But I do have a couple of questions. I'd love to see them win a close game on Friday.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. Learning to value possessions in the final minutes. And you're right. That is a huge part of the tournament because you're not going to blow everybody out. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
You're going to play close games. And those games can be catalysts for how you play moving forward. I mean, I go back as far as my childhood of watching that 1995 UCLA run where Tyus Edney hits that shot against Missouri.
Yeah.
And how tight that game was, and then the run that UCLA and Ed O'Bannon go on from that point moving forward to win the national championship. Auburn's tight game against New Mexico State, that spurred them on. They blew Kansas out, blew North Carolina out, and then had to play another really difficult game against Kentucky in the pivotal minutes, making smart plays in overtime, minus that shot by Horace that sent it into overtime.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought Bryce was going to lose it when Horace chucked that one.
Bryce and Steven.
Oh, I know. You could see the look on Stephen Pearl's face.
Man.
But, those games were catalysts for that team to get to where they got. So watching them win a difficult one, like you said, against Arkansas or South Carolina, and then playing what I think Tennessee is going to be that next game. If Auburn is to win that game that they're matched up against the 4 versus 5 or whatever seed Arkansas is, if they win that game going against Tennessee, I like the matchup against Tennessee better than I do Kentucky in the second round, right? I actually like our draw because I think we match up well with Tennessee. I think Bruce has a good feel for what Rick Barnes wants to do and how to create some difficulties for him. especially with his flex cut offense. I think they know how to hit their spots and attack that defense that Tennessee is so effective with against a lot of other teams. So I'm with you, man. It's going to be exciting to watch this team on Friday, I think. What time do they tip on Friday?
2:30 basically. The first game's at noon, and then it'll be 25 minutes after that. So if the refs don't get crazy, then 2:30. But who knows? Sometimes with the second halves of these games have been stupid. So I'm hoping for a 2:30 game. That'll also be interesting, by the way, because Tennessee is the first game on Friday,
Right.
So all those Tennessee fans are going to hang around now. South Carolina beat Tennessee, so I don't know that they necessarily think they match up better with Carolina or Tennessee. Like Carolina took them to the brink twice. They may not care, but I would think they may just root for the underdog in that game. I still think they probably look at Auburn as a more dangerous team.
Sure.
Their fan base. So I could easily see in that game, Auburn fans will be there on Friday. But Tennessee fans are going to hang around too. I could easily see the Tennessee fans in the arena hanging around, rooting for South Carolina a little bit. It's not like it'll be a road game, but I could easily see them just, if they had to pick a side, I could see them picking the South Carolina side and giving them a little bit of life. I could see that happening.
I don't disagree with you, though. There are Tennessee fans, and I've run across a couple that still have strong affection for Bruce Pearl. I mean, don't get me wrong. They love what Rick Barnes has done, but there's some Tennessee loyalists out there that still have a strong affection for Bruce Pearl and what he was able to do for that program. So, yeah, I would agree, right?
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't, if they cheer for Auburn, it's not going to surprise me if they do that either, because they're cheering for Bruce to see what he can do. And as you said, look, Tennessee beat us head up, and Dalton Knecht had a phenomenal game when they played. Can he do that again? I don't know. I mean, he's a special player, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. But it's going to be interesting, man. There are a lot of dynamics in this SEC tournament that are attractive to me. That I can't say that I've always felt that way about the SEC basketball tournament. Sometimes I'm kind of like, oh, let's just get this over with and move on, man. But this one, to me, has a real attractive quality about it. I think it's probably because of how competitive the SEC has been this year. You talked about it before. 4 teams that finished 13-5 in a 4-way tie for second place. Florida did they finish at 11-7? Is that where they were at? Or 12-6?
Yes. What did they finish? Did they finish a game back or 2 games? I think they just finished a game back.
I can't remember. I think they lost to Vanderbilt in their last game.
That's true. Then it'd be 11. That's right. That's right. That would have pushed them to 11. Well, that was shocking,
wasn't it? Like just to see Jerry Stackhouse pull that one out.
We talked to Bruce afterwards, by the way, and he was talking about the SEC, and we were in the media room, and he was talking about the toughness of the league, and he goes, you guys saw how Vanderbilt played Florida close today, and then he goes, I didn't even see how that game ended. What happened? And they were like, no, Vandy won by 1. He goes, Vandy beat Florida, and we were like, yeah. He was like, wow. He was like, whoa.
Yeah, no, exactly, because you wouldn't have expected that. In that matchup, you would have expected Florida to dominate just because of kind of the way that Vandy's had a little bit of a rough season this year. But that goes to show you, like you said, the strength of the league. It can be anybody's night. And so that's the attractive part of it. The quality up and down. I think the SEC is going to have the second most teams in the NCAA tournament behind the Big 12, who's probably the preeminent basketball conference right now. I mean, I think that's fair to say. They're probably looking at 10, 11 teams potentially getting into the tournament. The SEC is looking at probably 7 right now.
So State is the bubble team?
State is the bubble team. So 6 for sure. And then depending on what State probably does in the tournament, probably drives what happens with them. If they'd have gotten that one against South Carolina this past Saturday, I think it would have been a slam dunk that they would have been in. But being that they dropped that game at home, I don't know what that does to their chances. So we'll see. I think as of right now, they're one of the last 4 in, but that could be subject to change here relatively soon.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think that State team I think they're a tournament. I think they're good enough to win a game or 2 in the NCAA tournament. But it's interesting that Texas A&M is Mississippi State's 42nd in the net. A&M's 46th. A&M finished a game ahead of Mississippi State in the SEC standings. They're only 1 game apart in the overall record, and yet, Mississippi State's the bubble, and there's really no mention of A&M getting in, which is interesting. I think A&M could be a team, if they make a run, which I don't expect them to necessarily. But if they were to make a run to Sunday, could they get pushed in?
It's possible.
But I don't even know. I don't even know what side of the. I don't even know where A&M is. Let's see. They play. There they are. They play Ole Miss Thursday. Ole Miss is playing like garbage. So
Yeah,
if A&M wins that one, I guess they get. I don't know. I don't have the bracket in front of me. Well, they're the bottom. They're in the bottom, right?
They are. They're in the.
So
they're not.
I think they get Bama.
That's a tough matchup for Alabama right now, especially if Riley Griffin's not going to be ready to play. And I did see where I think it was Dunaway reported that Griffin is out for the next week for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And maybe I'm getting that incorrectly.
It looks like Kentucky. It looks like they get Kentucky. If I'm looking at this right, they would get Kentucky. So
yeah, that probably ends their season right there.
But to your point, like 6 SEC teams get in. Let's say Mississippi State doesn't get in, or even if they do, 6 of the SEC teams that get in, there's going to be plenty of people picking any one of those 6 to make runs. Like every one of those teams will have, probably thousands of brackets in the ESPN bracket challenge. You know what I mean? Like thousands of people will pick Florida to make the Sweet 16, or Auburn, or Alabama, or Kentucky, or Tennessee, or South Carolina. Like all those will have people picking those teams to make runs. Like I don't know when the last time the SEC had 6 legit teams that if any of them made the second weekend or beyond, you're like, yeah, no, I'm not surprised at all.
I'm with you. I mean, that speaks to the quality for sure. And obviously right now, I think Kentucky's probably playing the best basketball, but
yeah.
Tennessee is also playing well. Auburn's playing well down the stretch. Alabama seems to be struggling some, but is that a byproduct of the schedule and some tough games on the road? Also an injury to Riley Griffin. You don't really know. I feel very comfortable saying those 4 teams right now for sure. Like you're going to have a ton of people predicting them to be second weekend teams. South Carolina is an interesting matchup. If they get the right matchups, that's the kind of team that's going to grind on you and wear on you, knows themselves well enough that you don't want to see them in a 4-5 matchup.
No.
Like I wouldn't, you know what I mean? If I'm one of these other conference teams, and then Florida, who when they're hot, they can play with anybody in the country. They've got kind of the linked athleticism bounce that you want. The bigs down low have really good shot blocking ability. So they can be a difficult matchup, specifically if you catch a team that's a little undersized in the post or may not necessarily have athletic bigs. I think they can give you some problems. So like you said, man, I mean, out of those top 6, there's not a team that you wouldn't say, hey, they have no shot of making the second weekend. And when you have 6 teams that you can say that about, you know that you have a really good top half of your conference.
Yeah. It's just going to depend. I think Auburn probably going, well, I don't think we know yet. Spokane is the popular place for them to be sent, but I don't think anything's set for sure. And if they did get sent out there, I think if they made the second round, it'd be in like San Diego. So I don't know if you just go out there and stay. I mean, I don't know if you go to Spokane and then come back to Auburn for 2 days and then go back to San Diego. That would be wild. But I don't know that matters. I mean, they went out to San Diego. The 18 team went out there, and the year they lost to Clemson went out there. The team that made the run went to Salt Lake City. So last year they went to Birmingham and went 1-1. So I don't know that it necessarily matters where they go. I think the matchup is more important. But I'm excited, man. I just feel like there's this team's due a little bit. A couple early exits from the SEC tournament. Past couple years and he's right. Get past that first one, we'll see what happens. But I think this team's has got the right pieces to make a run. We'll see if they do. Well, I guess we'll find out. They play Friday, and then they would play the noon game on Saturday if they win against Tennessee, which would be probably Tennessee. We say that. I don't think somebody's going to upset Tennessee. I think LSU, Mississippi State. I mean,
yeah,
I don't see that happening.
Not in Nashville. I mean, maybe in a different venue, but not in Nashville. But Justin, take us home here. Talk to us about, this is another very popular topic on the board. You had a really fantastic post, and you've been on the pointy end of the spear here as it pertains to knowledge about our upcoming apparel deal and the negotiations
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Talk to us about Nike, Under Armour. What are you hearing right now, and kind of what's the trajectory of where everything's headed?
Yeah, I mean, I posted that and sort of like I read the board for a little bit when I did, and then I kind of got away and hung out with my little girl, and then got up this morning. I was like, dang, that post blew up. But yeah, I was probably being conservative, honestly, in my assessment. If you made me put money down, like I'd bet, on Nike, and I'd bet a pretty good amount. Like I think that's where it's at. I'm not in the room, so to say done deal or not, I don't
Right.
know the specifics of that to say that. Like there's always a way to back out of something or something not to work out. So I don't know that I would use that word just because I'm not privy to that type of specific information. But I mean, as I said, it would be shocking if it's not. I think at this point, if it wasn't Nike, then something dramatic happened at this point. So I think Auburn's set up to go with Nike. We'll see when it happens. Could be March, but it might be a little rushed at this point. It could be April. I don't know that it'll go all the way to the summer though. At this point, I feel like if we're talking about March, then it feels hard to think it'll happen in June. Like if so. I feel pretty good. That's the direction they're going to go. I think a big part of it is just making sure they handle things with Under Armour right. That contract is up in June of 25. They don't want to, I mean, Auburn has every right to do whatever they want. They can announce that they're moving to Nike in a year. They can do whatever they want, but just, maybe how you do it. And, you don't want to piss Under Armour off to the point where they just decide to like stop giving you track and field apparel or other stuff you need or be difficult or whatever. So just want to do it the right way, whatever that is. But I do think it's that Auburn's going to make the move to Nike. Now, how does that apply to basketball? I'll say this. I think 10 years ago, huge deal. Huge deal. I think now, big deal, not as big a deal as 10 years ago because of NIL. NIL's, helped you out there a little bit where you can overcome some, hey, you went to AAU team that's Nike, we're Under Armour. NIL, I think you can overcome some of that stuff. Or if it's Adidas, let's say if Auburn does move to Nike and they're recruiting a kid that played on an Adidas AAU team, you can overcome some of that with NIL and just overall exposure that these kids can get now. But it's still a big deal. I mean, Nike and basketball, Nike and Adidas is where you want to be. And so it definitely helps. You got the kid that AJ, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, that visited, I guess, a couple weeks ago, has this deal with Nike. Now, that won't run into college, but it'll run for his high school career. Well, even if that deal ends, right? Like hypothetically, let's just say hypothetically Auburn was still with Under Armour. And they could say, well, that deal with that kid's going to end, so we can still get. But he's been with Nike for 2 years. He's been getting shoes. He's been getting apparel. He thinks of himself as a Nike guy. It still would be tough. And so just there's a lot more high profile players that associate with Nike, whether it's their AAU team or whatever, than anything else. And so being able to sort of transition that in college, have the backing of Nike, I think is just going to help you appeal to more top level basketball players. And it could help you close the deal on a few. It's not the end all be all, but it's going to help more than it does now. But again, I'd say a decade ago, huge, massive deal. I'd say now it's important and it's a big deal to make the change. And there's no question basketball wanted to move to Nike. So like if that answers your question about whether it's important, that was their preference. But I don't think they think it's like now all of a sudden they're just going to like rake all the kids in. But I do think it'll be an asset, a big help.
Agreed. And I think the way I've tried to kind of couch it is you're going to have access to a greater pool of talent. Like Bruce has the kind of personality and the brand to be able to recruit nationally regardless. But being, a phone call away from every AAU coach in the Nike circuit, and to be able to walk in with that Nike logo on your chest, and you're right, the relationships that a lot of these kids have with Nike in-house, it just further fosters what Auburn's going to be capable of on the recruiting trail. Right now, like you said, NIL is an equalizer. Well, what happens when you have NIL and Nike paired together?
Yeah.
How does that help you? I think it helps you immensely. Is it, like you said, you're going to go in and start raking in number one classes? Probably not, but that's not the way Bruce recruits anyway. But it is going to help him with some of that upper echelon talent that's fostered a relationship, because for those that don't know, these kids are playing AAU at a young age, man. You're talking about kids that have been with on a Nike circuit probably since what, 12, 13 even.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? That Nike has identified and grown in their AAU circuit on their grassroots program. But that's enough of that. I'm going to let you take us home here, man. But it's been another really fun conversation with you, my man, talking a little Auburn basketball.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about how Auburn fared in Nashville. We'll be talking about where Auburn's seated in the NCAA tournament, what the matchups are. We'll know all of that come next Tuesday, and prepare for another exciting NCAA tournament. It's just fun now. Auburn's just part of the NCAA tournament. For so many years, you'd watch the NCAA tournament and wish to see Auburn in there, and now it's just absolutely the norm, and it's awesome. Never take that for granted. So we'll be back next week to wrap up the SEC tournament, talk NCAA tournament, and all that good stuff. Appreciate you, Alan. I'm Justin. Go to Auburn Live, subscribe. Still $1 for a month. You can try that out. So go to Auburn Live, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on notifications. That's a big help as well. We'll see you guys next week.